The planet Zithera had always been a world of grandeur, its towers reaching like silver spires into a sky tinged with violet clouds. Every surface shimmered with alien energy, and every corner of the royal palace seemed alive with the hum of advanced technology. At the heart of this vast empire was Queen Eloria, ruler of unmatched intelligence and strength. She was known across the stars for her strategic mind, her skill in combat, and her unshakable composure. No being had ever surprised her, until now. Ethan Carter, a human from Earth, arrived on Zithera under diplomatic terms. He was small in comparison to the tall, muscular aliens of the planet. His brown hair fell lightly over his forehead, and his green eyes held a quiet confidence that seemed almost unremarkable at first glance. The alien ambassadors had expected a timid, fragile species, someone they could underestimate with ease. They were mistaken. From the moment he stepped into the palace, Ethan noticed details that others ignored. The subtle movements of the palace guards, the flicker of communication in the queen's eyes, and even the shifting patterns of energy across the walls spoke volumes to him. Unlike the Zitherans, who relied heavily on their physical prowess and innate psychic abilities, Ethan relied on observation, analysis, and calm judgment. The ceremony to meet Queen Eloria was elaborate beyond imagination. Crystal floors reflected the light of twin suns, and alien instruments played a melody that vibrated the air in a way humans were not accustomed to. When Ethan entered the grand hall, every eye turned toward him. The court expected hesitation, fear, or awe, but they saw none. He walked steadily, shoulders squared and head held high. Queen Eloria watched him closely from her elevated throne. She was curious and perhaps a little amused. Many had warned her that humans were insignificant, weak creatures, but she sensed something different in Ethan. There was an undercurrent of strength in his calmness, a hidden resilience that she could not yet define. "Human," she said, her voice resonating with authority, "you come from a small, distant world, yet you walk among us with confidence. Tell me, do you understand the responsibilities of your presence here? Appearances can be deceiving. Indeed, you may find that the same is true here." She gestured to the surrounding nobles, who whispered among themselves, exchanging doubtful looks. The first days of Ethan's stay were uneventful on the surface. He learned the customs of the palace, met the other nobles, and attended various diplomatic functions. But beneath the surface, subtle tests were being conducted. Queen Eloria, curious and cautious, wanted to see if the human could withstand the subtle pressures of their world. She observed him during meals where utensils hovered over floating tables, in training exercises where alien combatants displayed extraordinary strength, and even in discussions where complex strategy was debated at lightning speed. Ethan watched, listened, and learned. He never interfered unnecessarily, but intervened when a situation required precision or insight that aliens often overlooked. When a misfired energy conduit threatened to singe several guards, Ethan calmly stepped forward, assessing the patterns of energy and redirecting it safely. The act was done without fanfare, yet every witness felt a shiver of respect. Even the queen's lips parted slightly in surprise. The court had expected Ethan to be fragile, but each small demonstration hinted at something more. He lifted objects that even trained aliens struggled with, anticipated the moves of the palace's most skilled warriors during training drills, and never seemed to tire, even after long days filled with alien rituals and challenges. It was a quiet strength, understated but undeniable. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting violet shadows across the palace, Queen Eloria called Ethan to her private chambers. The room was vast, filled with artifacts and instruments beyond human understanding. The queen's posture was regal, yet her eyes held an uncharacteristic curiosity. "You move through this palace as though you belong," she said. "You have survived tests that would have challenged even my most elite warriors. How do you maintain such composure?" "Humans survive because we continue, even when the odds seem impossible. Do not assume that your survival here is guaranteed by intelligence alone." He alerted the guards and guided them to intercept the intruders without anyone noticing his presence. The aliens, accustomed to brute force or psychic detection, were amazed. Humans could act in ways they did not anticipate. During one public ceremony, the queen ordered a display of strength among her top warriors. They lifted immense weights, ran across suspended energy bridges, and demonstrated feats that made humans appear fragile. Ethan watched calmly from the sidelines. When a sudden mechanical failure threatened to collapse a platform, he stepped forward, steadying the structure with a precise placement of his hands. It was not brute strength. It was calculation, timing, and instinct combined. The audience gasped and whispers filled the air. Queen Aloria's expression was unreadable. She had expected humans to be weak, easily manipulated, and dependent. Yet here was one who moved with quiet confidence, acted decisively, and displayed an almost unexplainable resilience. She realized with a growing sense of unease that she had underestimated not just Ethan, but humanity as a whole. One night, as the palace settled into a quiet hum of energy, Ethan walked the upper terraces, observing the alien city sprawling below. The lights shimmered like stars, yet the city lacked the chaos, the unpredictability, and the persistence that humans carried in their spirit. He felt a subtle determination welling within him, not of arrogance but of understanding. Humans had always been underestimated in the galaxy, and here on Zithera, the opportunity to prove their unique strength was before him. Queen Aloria, from her chambers, watched him through the energy screen. She could see the calm assurance in his stance, the way he carried himself as if the world belonged equally to him. Something in her mind shifted. She had married him expecting compliance and quiet diplomacy. Instead, she had gained a partner whose hidden strength could alter the balance of her entire world. The night ended quietly, but the air of tension and anticipation lingered. Ethan had survived the first weeks without incident, but the subtle recognition of his potential had begun to spread. Among the nobles, whispers of the human grew louder. Among the guards, respect replaced doubt. And for Queen Aloria, a quiet realization settled. Humans were not to be underestimated, and her life, and perhaps her reign, would never be the same. The following morning, a message arrived from the outer colonies, signaling the start of a diplomatic council that would test Ethan further. Aliens from multiple worlds would witness him, observe his reactions, and, perhaps, attempt to challenge him. Yet Ethan walked forward with the same calm, measured pace, prepared for whatever came next. In that moment, Queen Aloria finally allowed herself a small, private acknowledgement. The human she had married was unlike any being she had encountered. And as she watched him step into the hall, she could not help but wonder. If humans were capable of this quiet, controlled strength, what might they achieve when fully unleashed? The palace, once a place of certainty for the alien queen, now seemed filled with potential and unknown possibilities. And in the heart of Zithera, a human named Ethan Carter was about to change everything, one quiet act of strength at a time. The days after Ethan's initial weeks at the palace passed with a rhythm that seemed calm to the outside observer, but beneath the surface, a subtle tension grew. Queen Aloria had begun to recognize that the human she married was not merely surviving Zithera's pressures. He was quietly excelling at them. It was not the strength of muscle alone, nor the raw energy that impressed her most. It was his combination of patience, observation, and adaptability. Ethan began to learn more about the intricate workings of the palace. He noticed the flow of information among nobles, the way minor disputes could escalate into dangerous tensions, and how the palace's security systems worked not just to protect but to control. He listened more than he spoke, and yet when he did act, it was precise and effective. One morning, while touring the outer halls with a group of young nobles, Ethan noticed a small tremor in the energy conduits powering the palace's floating platforms. A faulty connector caused an unsteady vibration, invisible to those untrained in observation. Before anyone realized the danger, Ethan extended his hands to the conduits, guiding the energy flow in a careful pattern that stabilized the platforms. Several nobles were startled when they realized what had happened. They had all been moments from falling, yet the human had corrected the problem silently, with no assistance from Zithera's advanced systems. Queen Aloria had been observing from her private gallery. The look on her face was unreadable, but inside, a slow recognition formed. Ethan's strength was more than physical. Humans possessed an intuitive understanding of situations, a capacity to adapt in real time that aliens often underestimated. She made a mental note to test him further. The next event came unexpectedly. An interstellar envoy from the neighboring system of Krillin arrived with a challenge. The Krillins were a proud species, physically powerful and renowned for their dueling traditions. They had heard rumors of the human consort and sought to demonstrate that he was no match for an elite warrior. During a ceremonial display, the Krillin champion, massive and imposing, stepped onto the central platform. His presence alone caused murmurs throughout the audience. Queen Aloria stood beside Ethan, expecting him to appear hesitant or cautious. Instead, he stepped forward calmly, examining the platform, the energy flows, and the spacing between the spectators and the duelists. The Krillin lunged first, relying on sheer strength and speed. Ethan did not react with brute force. Instead, he moved with precision, sidestepping attacks with timing and balance that the aliens could not predict. Each movement was measured, almost effortless, yet entirely effective. The Krillin grew frustrated. His power alone could not anticipate Ethan's adaptive maneuvers. The crowd watched in astonishment. Aliens whispered among themselves, reevaluating what they knew about humans. The Krillin attempted a direct strike, aiming for what he assumed was a weak point in Ethan's frame, but Ethan anticipated the angle, shifting his weight and using the momentum to redirect the attack safely. Within moments, the Krillin was forced to step back, panting, while Ethan remained calm, unscathed, and composed. Queen Aloria's eyes widened slightly. She realized that humans had evolved differently. Strength was not measured solely in force. It was measured in observation, adaptation, and endurance. Ethan had shown her that even the most powerful alien warrior could be challenged without aggression, simply by combining instinct with intelligence. After the duel, Ethan offered the Krillin a gesture of respect, a simple nod. The alien, still recovering from surprise and exhaustion, returned the nod with a hesitant but sincere acknowledgement. Among the audience, whispers turned into quiet admiration. Humans were not weak. They were unpredictable, capable, and in some ways superior in adaptability. That night, the Queen summoned Ethan to her chambers once more. She wanted answers, explanations, something to justify what she had witnessed. But Ethan did not offer secrets or arrogance. He spoke simply with honesty. "Queen Aloria," he said, "humans survive by observing and adapting. We do not rely solely on strength because strength alone is limited. We combine thinking, planning, and instinct. What you saw today is not magic or luck. It is practice, awareness, and the willingness to remain calm under pressure." For centuries, she had relied on brute power, psychic skill, and strict training to maintain her rule. Yet this human strength was not just physical. It was strategic, creative, and persistent. She realized she had underestimated a species she had barely known. In the following weeks, Ethan continued to display subtle demonstrations of strength. He repaired complex machinery that even Zithra's engineers struggled with, assisted in mediating disputes among nobles with solutions that satisfied all parties, and even predicted minor security threats before they could materialize. Every action was measured, calm, and precise. The palace began to feel different in his presence, not more chaotic, but more alive. There was an energy that humans brought, one that balanced the order of the aliens with creativity and adaptability. One day, a minor rebellion broke out in the outer sector of the palace. A group of alien workers, disgruntled by changes in energy regulations, had barricaded themselves in a maintenance chamber. The chief of palace security, accustomed to Zithra's norms, prepared to send elite soldiers to overpower the group. Ethan intervened. He entered the chamber alone, calmly assessing the barricades and the expressions of the workers. Rather than using force, he spoke to them in a clear and measured tone. He identified the root of their frustration and offered solutions that would satisfy their demands without compromising security. Within an hour, the workers agreed to cooperate peacefully. The security chief watched in astonishment. No alien warrior had ever resolved a rebellion without conflict, yet a human had done so effortlessly. Queen Aloria, observing from her balcony, was stunned. She had always assumed that aliens' strength and psychic abilities were unmatched. Yet here was a human, using patience, observation, and intelligence, achieving results that brute force could never accomplish. Ethan's growing influence was subtle but undeniable. Nobles began consulting him, not out of fear, but out of respect. Guards sought his advice, and even other alien species visiting the palace took note of his abilities. He never boasted or demanded recognition. He simply acted, with efficiency and insight. During a particularly complex diplomatic council, representatives from 5 different alien systems convened to negotiate trade and territorial agreements. Tensions ran high as each species attempted to assert dominance over the others. The discussions were heated, voices raised, and the room crackled with political energy. Ethan observed quietly. He noted the patterns of speech, the subtle gestures, and the underlying motivations of each representative. When the council reached an impasse, he spoke, not with authority but with clarity. He offered a compromise that acknowledged each party's interests while maintaining fairness. The result was immediate. Tension eased and representatives nodded in agreement. The Queen's advisors were amazed. They had expected a human to remain silent, unsure, or easily influenced. Instead, he had subtly altered the course of negotiations, achieving what alien diplomacy could not. By the end of the council, Queen Aloria's perception of humans had shifted entirely. They were not fragile. They were not limited by their size or appearance. Humans were adaptable, clever, and capable of feats that combined physical, mental, and emotional strength. And the human she married embodied all of these qualities. One evening, as Ethan walked through the palace gardens, he noticed the alien flower's bioluminescent glow reflected in the pools of water. The calm beauty of the gardens reminded him of Earth in a strange way, different, yet familiar. He realized that humans thrived because they could adapt to any environment, find order in chaos, and see solutions where others saw problems. Zithara, with all its advanced technology and strength, was no exception. Queen Aloria watched him from her chamber window. There was a mixture of admiration, respect, and something else she did not fully understand, an acknowledgement that she had underestimated not only this human, but an entire species. She had expected compliance and weakness, and she had found intelligence, adaptability, and resilience. In the palace, whispers of the human continued to grow. Aliens who had once dismissed humans as weak now observed Ethan with cautious respect. Some even began to wonder if humans might be the key to solving challenges that had plagued their civilizations for centuries. Ethan, however, remained humble. He did not seek praise or recognition. He acted because it was necessary, because observation and action were natural to him. And through his quiet deeds, he was slowly shaping the perception of humanity on Zithara, showing that even in a world of immense power and advanced abilities, humans possessed a strength that was difficult to measure but impossible to ignore. Queen Aloria reflected on the days that had passed since Ethan's arrival. She had married him expecting a gentle, compliant partner. Instead, she had found a force of calm determination, capable of remarkable feats. And she realized that his potential had not yet been fully revealed. If this was only the beginning, she wondered, what would happen when the true depth of human strength was unleashed? As night fell on the palace, casting long shadows over the violet towers of Zithara, Ethan stood on the terrace, looking at the stars that stretched across the sky. He felt the quiet pulse of the palace, the rhythm of life in an alien world, and he understood one truth. Humans were underestimated because they were unique, resilient, and capable of more than anyone, alien or human, might imagine. And in the quiet of the palace, Queen Aloria could only stare, wondering what this human, who had already achieved so much without force or dominance, might accomplish next. The calm that had settled over the palace was fragile. Whispers of Ethan's extraordinary abilities had spread throughout Zithara, reaching ears that had not previously noticed the human consort. Among them were the leaders of a rival alien faction, the Dreylands, known for their cunning and ruthless ambition. They had long sought to destabilize Queen Aloria's reign, and now they saw an opportunity. If they could discredit or remove her human consort, they believed, they could weaken her influence and seize power for themselves. The Dreylands plotted in secret. Their leader, Commander Vader, a tall, sharp-eyed alien with a reputation for tactical genius, devised a plan to infiltrate the palace and challenge the Queen's rule. He assumed, as many others did, that the human would be easily intimidated or eliminated. They did not understand Ethan. Back in the palace, life continued as usual, though subtle tension had begun to creep into the halls. Ethan noticed it first through the energy flows in the palace, the faint irregularities that hinted at tampering with the security systems. While most nobles remained unaware, Ethan's human instincts picked up on patterns the aliens could not read. He spent hours observing and analyzing, quietly mapping potential threats without drawing attention to himself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the violet horizon, Ethan walked along the outer corridors. He sensed something unusual in the patterns of the energy grids. A slight fluctuation in the security conduits indicated tampering. He followed the trail silently, his footsteps light on the polished crystal floors. He discovered a small group of Dreylan agents attempting to breach the palace from a concealed maintenance tunnel. Ethan did not panic. He knew confrontation would draw unnecessary attention. Instead, he acted with calm efficiency. He traced the energy lines, rerouting them subtly to create barriers and traps without alerting the intruders. When they advanced, they were caught by energy fields that immobilized them gently, without causing injury, and the alarms activated just enough to alert the palace guards. The intruders were captured quickly, and the palace was secure once again. Queen Aloria, observing from her chambers, could hardly believe what she had witnessed. The human had neutralized a dangerous threat before anyone even realized it existed. His actions were not only effective but strategic and precise. She began to see the truth of what humans could achieve, not by brute strength alone, but by combining intelligence, observation, and timing. The next day, a grand announcement was made. The Draylen faction would formally challenge Queen Aloria's reign through the upcoming Interstellar Council of Strength and Strategy, a ceremonial event where leaders from multiple worlds demonstrated their capabilities. The Queen's advisors were uneasy, expecting this to be a trial of alien power, where Ethan's presence might be a liability. Ethan, however, remained calm. He had already studied the Council's format, analyzed previous demonstrations, and considered possible strategies. He did not see the event as a threat, it was an opportunity. Humans thrived under challenges, adapting to situations that others might find overwhelming. When the day of the council arrived, the palace halls were filled with dignitaries from dozens of alien civilizations. Massive platforms floated above the ground, each designed to test strength, strategy, and agility. The Draylans presented their champions, confident in their superiority. Even the elite Zitharan warriors watched with tension, knowing that any misstep could turn the balance of power. Ethan observed quietly, noting patterns in the challengers' movements, the timing of their attacks, and the subtle ways in which they attempted to intimidate their opponents. When the first challenge began, a test of agility and energy control, he stepped forward at the Queen's invitation. His movements were calm and deliberate, guided by observation and instinct rather than raw force. The first Draylen warrior lunged with aggressive precision, expecting to overpower the human. Ethan sidestepped effortlessly, redirecting the attacker's momentum and guiding him to a safe landing. The crowd gasped. No human should have been able to withstand such an assault, yet Ethan had done so without apparent effort. Next came a series of strategic challenges, designed to test intelligence and adaptability under pressure. Holographic simulations required competitors to solve complex energy puzzles while under timed constraints. Ethan analyzed patterns that the aliens overlooked, noticing correlations and sequences that were invisible to the untrained eye. With calm, precise actions, he solved the puzzles more efficiently than even the most experienced alien strategists. Commander Vader's frustration grew. He had assumed that a human would be a weak link, easily distracted or intimidated. Yet Ethan remained composed, methodical, and increasingly confident. Every movement, every choice, revealed the depth of human adaptability. The alien spectators began to murmur in astonishment. Humans were not fragile. They were unpredictable, resourceful, and capable of feats that combined thought, timing, and action in ways aliens could not anticipate. As the council continued, a more dangerous challenge was presented. A simulated attack threatened the council's central chamber. The alien defenders expected chaos, assuming that humans would panic under the complex assault. Ethan, however, remained calm. He identified weak points in the attacker's approach, guided defenders with precise instructions, and coordinated actions that minimized risk and maximized efficiency. By the time the simulated threat was neutralized, Ethan had not only preserved safety but demonstrated leadership that even seasoned alien commanders admired. Queen Aloria watched him closely, her thoughts turning over and over. She had always valued strength and intelligence in her allies, yet she had underestimated what a human could bring to the table. Ethan's abilities were not just physical or mental. They were a unique combination of observation, adaptability, and calm courage. Even her most elite Zitharan warriors could not match his ingenuity under pressure. The final challenge was a duel between Ethan and Commander Vader himself. The commander, confident in his strength and skill, expected an easy victory over the human. Ethan accepted, but not with aggression. His approach was measured, using timing, observation, and adaptability. The duel was intense yet precise, a careful balance of strategy and reflex. Vader struck with force, expecting to overpower Ethan with sheer strength. The human sidestepped, redirecting energy with minimal effort and maintaining his own balance. He anticipated Vader's moves, not through premonition but through careful observation and calculation. Each maneuver left the commander increasingly frustrated, unable to adapt to the human's unconventional style. Finally, Vader attempted a direct, powerful strike intended to end the duel. Ethan deflected it with a precise motion, using the commander's momentum to throw him safely to the side. The crowd erupted in astonishment. The human had not only survived the duel, but had demonstrated control, strategy, and resilience beyond what anyone had expected. Queen Aloria's reaction was one of quiet awe. She had married this human expecting compliance and subservience, yet here he was, proving that humans could excel in ways even the most elite aliens could not. She realized that his presence was not a liability, it was an asset. Humans were capable of achieving feats that combined intelligence, courage, and physical skill in ways that aliens rarely understood. After the council, Ethan addressed the gathered leaders, not with arrogance but with clarity. He spoke of cooperation, adaptation, and the importance of observation in achieving success. His words, simple yet profound, resonated across species lines. Even the Dreylands, humbled by his performance, could not argue. They had witnessed human ingenuity firsthand and could no longer dismiss it. In the days that followed, the palace hummed with a renewed energy. Nobles consulted Ethan for advice, security officers sought his insight, and even rival factions began to acknowledge the human as a force of remarkable capability. Queen Aloria, observing all this, felt a mixture of respect, admiration, and curiosity. Humans were not only strong, they were extraordinary in ways she had never imagined. Ethan, for his part, remained humble. He did not seek recognition or praise. He acted out of instinct, observation, and the natural human tendency to adapt and survive. Yet with every action, every calculated move, he was reshaping the perception of humanity on Zithra. The palace, once a place of rigid order and power, now felt dynamic and alive, energized by a presence that aliens could not predict or control. One evening, as he walked through the palace gardens, Ethan reflected on the events of the past weeks. Humans had always been underestimated across the galaxy. On Earth, on distant worlds, wherever they were seen as weak, they had survived by combining thought, action, and willpower in ways others could not anticipate. On Zithra, that legacy was unfolding anew. Queen Aloria, watching him from her chambers, understood that she had underestimated more than a single human. She had underestimated an entire species capable of extraordinary adaptability and resilience. And she realized that her choice to marry Ethan had not only brought a partner into her life, it had brought a new kind of strength to her empire. The palace, once threatened by intrigue and rebellion, now stood secure not just through alien power, but through human ingenuity. The Dreylands had been humbled, the council impressed, and the nobles inspired. And at the center of it all was a quiet human who had achieved extraordinary feats without displaying arrogance or dominance. As the stars twinkled above Zithra, Ethan stood on the terrace, contemplating the future. He understood that his actions had consequences, that humans could shape perceptions across worlds, yet he remained focused on what mattered most: observation, adaptation, and calm courage. Queen Aloria, watching him, could only marvel. She had married a human expecting compliance, but she had discovered a force unlike any she had ever encountered. The palace would never be the same, and the queen knew that the story of this human was only just beginning. The days following the Interstellar Council were filled with preparation and anticipation. Word of Ethan's extraordinary performance had spread far beyond the palace walls, reaching other systems and civilizations. Aliens who once dismissed humans as weak now whispered in astonishment, recognizing the subtle power of the species. Yet even with the praise and attention, Ethan remained calm, focused, and methodical, as if he had been preparing for this moment all his life. Queen Aloria had sensed the undercurrents of challenge building around them. Despite his previous successes, she knew that some would not be content with mere displays of intelligence or adaptability. To secure her reign and fully understand the human she had married, she decided it was time to test Ethan directly, physically, mentally, and strategically. She summoned him to her private chambers. The room glowed with a soft violet light, and alien artifacts lined the walls, each humming with energy and history. Aloria's posture was regal, yet her eyes betrayed curiosity and a hint of something unfamiliar: anticipation. "Ethan," she began, "you have shown skill, wisdom, and adaptability, yet there are tests that cannot be measured by councils or ceremonies. I want to see the full extent of your abilities." It was vast, suspended above the palace grounds, and designed to challenge even the most elite Zitharan warriors. Platforms shifted unpredictably, energy fields pulsed across the floor, and holographic adversaries could strike with precision and speed. This arena tests more than strength, Eloria explained. It tests judgment, reflexes, endurance, and the ability to adapt to unpredictable situations. No one has completed it perfectly. I want to see how you fare. While the aliens relied on instinct and physical power, Ethan relied on observation, pattern recognition, and adaptive thinking. The first challenge involved navigating the floating platforms while avoiding high-intensity energy beams that crisscrossed the arena. Elite Zitharan warriors often fell into traps or misjudged distances, but Ethan moved with precision. He calculated angles, timed his jumps carefully, and adjusted his movements in real time. Each leap and landing was deliberate, efficient, and fluid. The spectators watched in awe, whispering at his unusual agility. Next came a test of endurance. The holographic adversaries simulated multiple attackers, striking from different angles simultaneously. The warrior's instinct was to rely on brute strength, but Ethan's movements were guided by anticipation and adaptability. He sidestepped, redirected momentum, and used the attacker's own force to neutralize their advances. The crowd was silent with astonishment. Here was a human, untrained in their ways, performing feats they had believed impossible. Queen Eloria observed closely, fascinated. She realized that human strength was not always visible. It did not rely solely on muscle or psychic energy, but on adaptability, calculation, and calm courage under pressure. Ethan was proving that strength could be intelligence and strategy as much as physical ability. The arena then presented a mental challenge, a complex puzzle of energy conduits that required rapid problem-solving under time pressure. Many aliens struggled, attempting to force the conduits into place with brute power. Ethan, however, analyzed the flow of energy, recognized the patterns, and manipulated the conduits with minimal effort. Within moments, he had completed the challenge, stabilizing the system perfectly. Some of the alien spectators were visibly frustrated. How could a human, one species they had assumed fragile, outperform their best warriors and strategists? The realization spread through the arena like wildfire. Humans were extraordinary in ways no one had anticipated. The final challenge combined strategy, agility, and endurance in a scenario designed to push competitors to their limits. Platforms shifted rapidly, energy barriers fluctuated, and holographic adversaries acted unpredictably. Even Zitharan champions had failed this challenge multiple times. Ethan approached it with calm focus. He assessed patterns, predicted movements, and adapted in real time. When a holographic enemy attempted to corner him, he used timing and momentum to redirect its force harmlessly. When a platform tilted unexpectedly, he adjusted his balance and trajectory seamlessly. Each obstacle, each adversary was met not with panic but with calculated action. Queen Eloria's eyes widened slightly as she observed him. The human's movements were fluid, precise, and confident, yet unassuming. He had not exhibited arrogance or recklessness. Every action served purpose and efficiency. The realization was clear. Ethan's strength was not just physical. It was a synthesis of observation, calculation, endurance, and courage, a combination that aliens rarely achieved. At the conclusion of the challenge, the arena erupted in astonishment. Even the most skeptical spectators could not deny the human's achievement. Ethan had completed the trial flawlessly, using a combination of intelligence, strategy, and adaptability that left seasoned warriors stunned. The queen approached him, her expression a mixture of awe and respect. "You have surpassed every expectation," she said softly. "Not through raw power, not through intimidation, but through ingenuity and calm determination. Humans are remarkable. Strength is not measured by force alone, but by the ability to adapt, protect, and persevere." In the following days, Ethan's presence began to influence the palace in subtle but profound ways. Guards adopted his strategies for security, nobles began seeking his insight for disputes, and even visiting alien dignitaries took note of his calm and methodical approach. Zithro itself seemed to shift in response to his quiet influence, becoming more efficient, adaptable, and resilient. However, not all challenges had ended. The Dreylands had not forgotten their earlier defeat. Commander Vader, humiliated by Ethan's performance at the council, was planning a larger assault, a direct attempt to overthrow the Queen using both strategy and force. Ethan anticipated their actions before any warning was given. His careful observation and analysis had allowed him to map potential approaches, predict vulnerabilities, and prepare contingencies. When the attack finally came, it was sudden and intense. Draylan ships approached the palace perimeter under the cover of darkness, attempting to exploit weaknesses in the energy shields. Aliens scrambled to respond, relying on brute power and traditional tactics. Ethan, however, remained composed. He assessed the fleet, calculated trajectories, and advised the palace defense system on optimal energy deployment. Through precise guidance, the palace defenses neutralized the threat efficiently. Draylan ships were disabled without loss of life, and their ground forces were intercepted before reaching the palace. Every move was calculated, every response timely, and every action minimized risk. Queen Eloria watched in awe as the human she had married turned what could have been chaos into controlled success. After the threat was repelled, Ethan stood with the queen on the palace balcony, overlooking the horizon. The stars above Zithra shimmered brightly, and the energy fields of the palace hummed in quiet harmony. "You have changed the perception of humans on this world," Eloria said, her voice soft but filled with admiration. "They are no longer seen as weak or insignificant. You have shown strength in ways we could not have imagined. Humans survive by adapting. We face challenges with observation, calculation, and persistence. Strength is more than muscle. It is the ability to endure, to act with purpose, and to protect what matters." She had married expecting companionship, perhaps diplomacy, but she had gained a partner whose calm determination, adaptability, and intelligence could influence not only her palace but the future of the empire. The palace, once rigid and structured, now felt alive with possibility. The nobles whispered in respect rather than doubt. The guards followed strategies refined by human insight. Even the aliens who had once mocked humanity now looked on with cautious admiration. Ethan, however, remained humble. He did not seek recognition or power. His actions were deliberate, guided by instinct, observation, and a desire to protect and adapt. Yet through his deeds, he had reshaped the perception of humans on Zithra, demonstrating that their strength was not only real but extraordinary in ways that aliens had yet to fully comprehend. As night fell over the palace, the queen stood beside Ethan on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer beneath the violet sky. She realized that humans were not only capable of extraordinary feats, they were unpredictable, resilient, and remarkable in ways that could shape the destiny of worlds. And in that moment, she understood the truth she had only begun to glimpse before. The human she had married was not merely a companion. He was a force, quiet yet undeniable, whose strength, intelligence, and courage would continue to astonish her, challenge assumptions, and redefine what it meant to be powerful. The night after the failed Draylan assault was quiet, but it was not peaceful. Across Zithra and beyond, the message had already spread. A human had stopped an attack that should have overwhelmed an entire palace. Not with overwhelming weapons, not with fear, but with planning, calm thinking, and perfect timing. Many alien leaders did not sleep that night. They stared at stars and wondered what humans truly were. Queen Eloria stood at the highest balcony of the palace, looking out over her city. The lights below shimmered like constellations on the ground. For the first time since she had taken the throne, she felt something close to uncertainty, not fear, but awe. Beside her stood Ethan, silent, hands resting calmly at his sides. "You knew they would come," she said at last. Ethan nodded. "Patterns repeat. Fear makes people rush. Pride makes them careless. You speak as if war is a problem already solved." Leaders from multiple systems were requesting immediate contact. Within minutes, the central chamber filled with towering holograms. Alien rulers, commanders, and diplomats appeared one by one. Some looked angry, others looked fearful. Many simply looked shocked. Commander Vader was among them, restrained and guarded, his defeat clear in his posture. Queen Eloria stepped forward, her voice calm but powerful. "You requested an emergency council. Speak." He did not try to look impressive. He simply waited. Another leader spoke. "Are all humans like this?" "The real question," he continued, "is whether your armies are prepared to face enemies that adapt faster than plans can be written. You hid your strength of a species that evolved on a dangerous world, where intelligence mattered as much as strength, and cooperation mattered more than dominance." He spoke of failure, adaptation, and persistence. "We don't win because we're the strongest," he said. "We win because we learn faster than we lose." Observational exchanges. Humans were no longer viewed as minor participants. They were now considered a variable no one could afford to ignore. After the council ended, Queen Aloria dismissed the chamber and remained behind with Ethan. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You changed everything," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head. "No. I showed what was already there." Zitharan's scientists had failed repeatedly to understand it. That machine began to wake. Seismic tremors shook the capital. Energy spikes rippled through the planet's shield network. The machine was not a weapon, it was a planetary system designed to reshape environments. If it activated incorrectly, Zitharo itself could be torn apart. The scientists panicked. The generals argued. The nobles shouted. Ethan listened. He requested access. Many objected. This was ancient alien technology far beyond human understanding, but Queen Aloria raised her hand. "Give him control," she commanded. Deep underground, surrounded by glowing structures and shifting energy fields, Ethan stepped into the heart of the machine. The air vibrated with power. Symbols shifted constantly, refusing to settle into known patterns. He did not rush. He observed. He noticed repetition hidden inside chaos. Feedback loops disguised as randomness. Safeguards designed to be interpreted, not forced. Alien engineers watched in disbelief as the human adjusted parameters by hand, redirecting flows with careful timing. He moved slowly, deliberately, like someone defusing a bomb while listening to its breathing. Minutes passed, then hours. At one critical moment, the machine surged violently. Energy spiked beyond safe limits. Alarms screamed. "Pull him out!" someone shouted. Queen Aloria did not move. Ethan planted his feet, braced his body, and redirected the surge manually. The force slammed into him, testing muscle, bone, and will. His body strained, but he did not break. This was not technology overcoming technology. This was a human enduring pressure until the system adapted to him. The surge stabilized. The machine powered down safely. Zithara was saved. When Ethan emerged, exhausted but standing, the underground chamber was silent. Scientists stared. Warriors knelt without realizing they were doing it. Queen Aloria walked to him slowly. For the first time since they met, she lowered her head. "Now I understand," she said. "Understand what?" Ethan asked. "You do not seek control, you become the point where chaos stops." As problem solvers, observers, strategists, Zithara flourished. Its systems became more flexible, its defenses more intelligent, its society stronger not through fear but through understanding. Queen Aloria ruled as she always had, but now with a partner whose strength did not threaten her throne, it strengthened it. One evening, long after the noise had faded, the Queen and Ethan stood together beneath the open sky. "When I married you," she said softly, "I believed I was gaining an ally." Somewhere among them, civilizations were rethinking everything they believed. Because when the human she married finally released his strength, the alien queen, and the galaxy with her, could only stare in shock. And humanity, once overlooked, had taken its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as the species that endured, adapted, and changed everything.